So this is Christmas time. It's always a very special time for the Christian world and for everyone. And we'd like to share the spirit of Christmas with everybody, especially to thank Paulima, Salima, Mamea, and also everyone who has taken an interest in following my mother's Facebook, her music. It's always a great time for us, Christmas, because my mother, you probably will know now, was a Christmas baby. She was born on Christmas Day in 1912. And I'd like this year to focus a short message to not only thank everyone who has followed this page, but all the musicians who have celebrated my mother's music by performing it, and all the other people who have taken the time to post their views and their feelings about Piliopo's music. We think it's enjoyed a very good revival. But this year I'd like to pay a special tribute to the main woman in my mother's life, her mother, because we've tended to focus on the fact that she was Taisi O.F. Nelson's daughter and the prominence of the Taisis and the Nelsons. But I'd like to focus today on her mother. So this is a picture that was taken of my grandmother, Rosabelle Moores. And Rosabelle was Moores, or the Missy Moore family. So my mother was half Missy Moore. I don't know if that's where her musical side came from, but she was the granddaughter of H.J. Moores. And H.J. Moores became very famous not only as a trader in Samoa, but he was mostly credited by the Tustala or Robert Louis Stevenson biographers as being the man that was responsible for Tustala or Robert Louis Stevenson deciding to live out the rest of his life in Samoa. We know he had consumption or TB, and he settled in Samoa on land that we now know from all the biographies was bought for him by H.J. Moores. And H.J. Moores wrote a book about his life with Stevenson. It was a very limited edition when it was published. It's become a very famous book because most biographers of Robert Louis Stevenson refer to this book when they want to talk about his life in Samoa. But we also know that Robert Louis Stevenson wrote a book, Island Nights, about his life in Samoa, where he talked about his life in Samoa. And we also know that my great-grandfather H.J. Moore's book, I've been very fortunate, and I'd like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to a very special friend, David Wantan. And for those of you who don't know, David Wantan is perhaps best known to you as the husband of the Judith Collins. And David has been kind enough to gift me a first edition which he obtained on eBay of this book of H.J. Moore's with Stevenson in Samoa. And the first edition that David has obtained and gifted to me has got it in H.J. Moore's handwriting. It's addressed to a Mrs. A.W. Elder, who must have been a lady that lived in Samoa in 1911. And he writes, commemorating a very pleasant acquaintance and an enjoyable picnic to Savaii. H.J. Moore's, May 22nd, 1911. So that's a book that H.J. Moore's wrote about, and of course H.J. Moore's, amongst his children, was his daughter Rosabelle, and of course the other famous H.J. Moore's that was involved with Samoan politics, that was his son, or my mother's uncle. But this is a very beautiful portrait of my grandmother Rosabelle. And I'd like to pay tribute to another great lady that was involved with my mother's music. And I'm pointing now to this beautiful mural that Paulima produced for me and gifted to me for Christmas. I was very moved when I received this. But in my mother's Facebook at the moment is a beautiful song rendition of Farewell Samoa, sung by the late Mavis Rivers, and it was a concert that she held in Auckland I think in the 1980s, where she had a very young-looking Yandel sisters backing her. And I think what you'll find is very impressive about this rendition of Farewell Samoa is that she introduces it as the last number of her concert, and she sings some Mahalia Jackson and other numbers. But in the program, it has Farewell Samoa as the last song, and it has composed by Billy Nelson. And she sings it beautifully. There's no doubt about it. It's one of my favorite versions of Farewell Samoa. And it's backed up beautifully also by the Yandel sisters. But Polima has been very impressed with the fact that apparently when my mother wrote the music, she had a slightly different key to the difference between the Samoan and the English versions. And not many singers picked up on this, or in fact sang it as written, or as composed. But apparently Mavis did. She appreciated why they were slightly different, and she sang it that way. And for those of you music aficionados who appreciate that sort of thing, you'll be able to tell when you hear Mavis singing the song how nice it is. The final comment I'd like to make before I wish you all a very special Christmas, this is not meant to take long, is that my mother's song, Tautaltala, she wrote the song about the time that I was born, and it was first performed by the Tuli brothers in 1954. And you'll find when you hear the recording of that 1954 recording that the song was taped in a special studio in Sydney, which my mother had arranged for the Tuli brothers to go in and sing. There are other songs like Can't You See I'm Sorry in that special tape that they cut. But you'll find that it was very inspirationally sung by Tulitfunga and Henry Hankin, who was a great musician in his own right and composer, and he also was the talking chief. Most of you will know he was the talking chief. He was also Pali'i of the late of His Highness Malietoa Tanumafili II, and he in the course of singing, he always considered Tautaltala his favorite song. And that was why when the family put out their first album, the Tulitfunga family, it was one of the few songs in there that's not composed by one of them, and they acknowledged Tautaltala as being composed by Piliopo, and it's there. But what is interesting is that my mother did not consider Tautaltala. She always thought of other more serious music, if I can call it that. Like my favorite is It's Only a Memory, and everyone has their own favorite. But for some reason, Tulitfunga Endile's favorite was always Tautaltala, and you will hear him singing it with great gusto and with great verve and obviously enthusiasm, because he liked the tune, he liked the words. Even though it was always considered a bit of a jingle, it's now become probably my mother's most well-known song of all her songs. And lately, we've had 20th Century Fox take an interest in wanting to use, of course the song is out of copyright, and we weren't seeking any funds, but and didn't ask for any, but we did agree, and what we appreciated was the fact that 20th Century Fox contacted Polima, and through that contact wanted to get our consent to using the song in a famous blockbuster movie that they're putting out next year. And they're going to have the song as part of it. And we said, no, all we want is acknowledgement that the song was composed by Piliopo Nelson Retzlaff. And that's a photo of me signing the document, which they asked me if I could sign on behalf of our family to allow them to use the song. I would throw in a comment here that Tautaltala is also on Take Home Pay. So for those of you who have seen Take Home Pay, could I just send a message out to the producers of Take Home Pay, as long as you acknowledge at some stage that the song that you played towards the end of the movie, Tautaltala, is a composition, or it's a song composed by Piliopo Nelson Retzlaff. But we also know that most primary schools who teach Samoan also use the song. And it would be nice if they don't necessarily need to acknowledge, but at least if they know when they're using the song as a teaching tool to teach Samoans, to teach English, Samoan language to English students, that they realize that this song, and that's why I'm very grateful to this rendition of Tautaltala that is in this special compendium of the music. I just want to mention one more thing, is that growing up in our household as a young boy, we always had a lot of blank sheet music lying around. And the reason was because my mother would at different times feel inspired, and I used to remember seeing her putting notes down on the piano and then writing things up. Apparently that's the way composers work, but it was always there. And so there's a very nice picture of her and my father in front of the baby grand piano that we got her one year, and she loved that baby grand piano. And of course she loved music, and she loved playing music, and she composed it for different reasons. But finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to wish each and every one of you a very, very Merry Christmas. May God's peace, joy, and alofa be with you at Christmas and throughout 2021. Soifua maia manuia.